G'day! Welcome to Cricket Daily. And for the second day in a row, we are on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, I apologize in advance for my appearance. I have made one effort. I've shaved my dreadful lockdown beard. My name is Paul Dennett. I'm joined by Bharat Sundaresan, the hirsute and resplendent with his beard, Bharat Sundaresan, journalist and author. Bharat, how are you going, mate?
I'm doing good, Paul. Marnus couldn't have picked a better day to put me on the roster because I did have my hair appointment yesterday, so it is looking much better than it should.
It's looking very silky and smooth. And also, just for those of you watching, you'll notice I'm wearing a yellow top. I can't quite match Tim May's one-day jersey that Menas was wearing yesterday, but I am wearing an Australian soccer supporters jersey for two reasons. One, Australia lost against Japan in an important qualifier last night, and two, our co-host Menas loathes the mention of any other sport on any podcast. So any opportunity I can, I'll do that. But there's plenty to talk about in the world of cricket. I'll get through the headlines now, and you'll just see what I'm talking about. Marnus Labuschagne has been found guilty of excessive appealing, but not dissent, for a celeb appeal that he made in a game in the Sheffield Shield game just recently. Ben Stokes on Twitter has put out a post showing that he can grip his bat once again for the first time in a long time, giving some hope that he might make it for the Ashes. It's probably a long shot, but you never know. There's a pay rise for Australian women cricketers. The average retainer for WNCL players is going up by 22%. So it's still not on parity with the men, but Cricket Australia continues to lead the way in that regard. Speaking of that, the Women's Big Bash starts tomorrow night, Australian time, 7:40 p.m. The Sixers versus the Stars from Hobart. David Warner would love to keep playing for Sunrisers Hyderabad, but it's pretty clear that's not likely to happen. BT Sport, that is the coverage of the Ashes in England, this upcoming series, won't be sending a commentary team out, so they'll be getting the Australian commentary team. I think they're going to be a mix of Channel 7 and Foxtel, although obviously there'll be Ian Botham and Alison Mitchell and Michael Vaughan, some English voices out there to keep them from having to hear too much convict drawl. South Australia versus Queensland kicks off today in the Marsh Cup. Jarvo is standing trial. Daniel Jarvis, who initially amused and then annoyed a lot of fans for his three separate pitch invasions in England just recently, has been charged with aggravated trespass. He's on bail to March. On bail until March. He denies all the charges, and he looked very happy to be photographed outside the court. I think any publicity is good publicity. Sunil Narayan won't be added to the West Indies squad. Captain Kyron Pollard said it's going to be the 15 that they've chosen. Initially, Roger Harper had said that Narayan he's the selector, didn't meet their fitness standards. But with his continued impressive performances in the IPL, there's been a lot of calls for him to be brought into the squad. But at this stage, he's not going to be. And Ian Chappell is raising funds for Afghanistan. So if you go to battingforafghanistan.org.au, he's supporting the UN Refugee Agency's work in Afghanistan. Now, Bharat, let's begin the main talking points with a quick preview of the upcoming big game between KKR and the Delhi Capitals. I've done a tiny bit of research, but it's sort of half research. Before the game between KKR and who were the mob they were playing?
Delhi?
No, the last game against
Bangalore.
Bangalore. I went back and did all of the stats, and it was very impressive that of the 11 starting players who were going to play in that game, that they had a run rate of 7.8 runs per over in the UAE version of the IPL this time round, batting average of 33, and a bowling average of bowling strike rate of economy rate of 6.1, which I thought was pretty impressive. Do you give them a chance of knocking off Ricky Ponting's Delhi?
They're the form team, Paul, and they've gone back to what worked for them back in 2012 and 14, a period where they won titles, which is have slow pitches, have three spinners operating at all times, and make sure that you put 140, 150 on the board and you can defend it, or you could chase it down, hold opposition to that score. Of course, they're not in control of the pitches right now in Sharjah, but I think the pitches have played a huge role in allowing KKR to play that old style of using their old approach. And Andre Russell's injury in a way has been a blessing in disguise because it's let
Mm.
them play Shakib Al Hassan, who's played a big role with the ball, and it's fit in perfectly. And Ricky Ponting, we saw that little clip of his after the last game when they lost to Chennai, talking about how he points at everyone and says, "You are the best team. You are the best players in the tournament," and they have been. They've dominated the IPL league stages for 2 consecutive years now, and they deserve to go ahead and win. But KKR, they've come from number 7 at the start of the second leg to now being just one shot away from reaching the final. If any team can stop Delhi, especially in Sharjah, it is Calcutta.
And do you think that Marcus Stoinis will play?
If he's fit, he just comes back in. Even though Ricky Ponting seemed very impressed with what Tom Curran did in the last game, except the last over, of course. But but I think Tom Curran did the best he could. But I'm sure Stoinis will come back. It's not just what he brings to the field. There's that energy he brings as well, which kind of blends in with the way Delhi like to play their cricket.
And just quickly, do you think that Ponting did throw Punt under the bus when asked why he bowled Curran in the last over rather than Rabada? And he sort of said, "You'd have to ask the captain that." Is that the sort of response that Alex Ferguson would have given?
Different sport. That's the second. Is that the second strike for you, Paul? You're spoken soccer twice in 6 minutes. Thomas is listening and watching now.
Don't sack me, Menace.
No, I think it's fair though. Cricket is a captain sport at the end of the day, right? Coaches get sacked more often than captains do in cricket. Or they don't get the kind of credit that, say, soccer managers get. So it's only fair that the call was left in Rishabh Pant's hand. And I think it was a good call. Like Ricky Ponting, you can hear him say in that little meeting as well. Tom Curran brought Delhi back into that game with his 3-over spell. Otherwise, Chennai was walking away with that match. So he deserved to bowl that last over. And as a captain in cricket, you go with your gut about who seems to be having that kind of day, right? And Tom Curran was, but unfortunately, MS Dhoni did MS Dhoni.
Exactly. Now, moving on to the broadcasting. Now, one of my favorite things has always been when you get to watch overseas broadcasts and you get to see your own side viewed from foreign eyes. And I've always thought it's a bit of a pity that in recent years, or basically for many years now, when it comes to the Ashes, the England television coverage gets their own commentators. Actually, it's going to be a third reference to another sport. One of my favorite things has been whenever Australia has played rugby league against England in England, their commentators have been so delightfully biased. You wouldn't say it's biased. They just want their team to win so much that it actually adds to the sport. They're nice guys. They add to the coverage. I think it's pretty cool that the English fans in the middle of the night over there are going to get to hear a bit of Ricky Ponting and maybe Damien Fleming and not Michael Slater, but Adam Gilchrist and Warney and a few others. What do you reckon?
Absolutely, Paul. I can tell you when I was growing up in India, for me, this part of the year meant listening to Channel 9, listening to Bill Lawry and Tony Gregg and Richie Benaud and all. But every time India toured here, I remember we would get the Star or the Indian coverage, like you said, with what England used to get before this time. And actually, whenever we had Australia hosted an Ashes, we used to get, for some reason, the Sky or the English broadcast, never the Channel 9 broadcast.
Right.
And that's how I discovered illegal streaming. It was not to watch anything illegal, but I just wanted the Aussie feed. I remember the 2011-12 India tour of Australia. I found this illegal stream just to listen to Channel 9. And like you, I wanted to know what a Richie Benaud would think of a Praveen Kumar or a Vinay Kumar or whoever, or what they have to say about a young Virat Kohli, for example, or an Umesh Yadav. And listening to Richie Benaud talk about Umesh Yadav, it's like kind of makes your day, right? You're like, oh yeah, cool. But yeah, that's the whole beauty of away tour. So I'm very, very happy that that's come back in a way after a long, long time.
It doesn't happen very often, but probably once every couple of years when cricket makes it onto ESPN Sports Center and they talk about it. That's my favorite thing. Especially years ago, they did a preview of the India-Pakistan semi-final in the 2010 World Cup. Well, no, a review, and that was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. But I digress. Labuschagne, if you haven't seen the footage, go back and have a look. He's bowling. It's a pretty good shout, but I think it pitched outside leg. But that celeb appeal where he's just bolted down the wicket and then kind of he gets the inkling that the umpire hasn't given it out, and he turns around with this aggrieved expression on his face as if to say, "What is going on?" He's been given a fine, but he hasn't been found guilty of dissent, just for excessive appealing. There was also, I'm just looking at this, the banter on Twitter where shortly after it, David Warner wrote, "Wow, I can't believe that Marnus would do that." And Tim Payne said, "We know who wouldn't be impressed with that bull." So he has got a little bit of form in this regard, Marnus Labuschagne.
He does. I mean, if you remember last year, some of the commentators did go after him, and you could hear Tim Payne and Matthew Wade kind of defending him, but in their own way, with what they were saying on the stump mic. And look, I was, and that's the thing with Marnus, right? I remember doing this interview last year with him about this whole thing of him being different, and I don't think beyond a point it can be put on, or you're trying to be someone who you're not. And just watching him during that last Shield game, it was a boring draw eventually. The pitch had nothing to offer, and Queensland were on the field for a long time. And Paul, 2-3 overs go with nothing happening. You can just hear Marnus making these sounds, and that's just him trying to keep himself excited. I think, as a low-level umpire, a local umpire, you don't want to see a top star do what he did, because then it kind of comes down the system, and you see a lot of young cricketers do that as well. But to put it down as him, I'm glad he wasn't found guilty for dissent. I don't think it was dissent. It was Marnus being Marnus. And he's always going to be an acquired taste. And he's always going to divide opinions, I think, for the rest of his career. Some people will think he's just too much. But Tim Payne and everyone else you speak to within the team just love having him on their side, not always having him in the opposition.
I'll tell you what, you'd know this as an umpire, but it must be galling that you get a decision right when the commentators say that's wrong. They blast you, and it takes 45 seconds or sometimes 2 minutes for when the replay vindicates you. They should have some sort of, how the bowler was always angry that the batter could raise their bat, but the bowler never got to do anything. Now they raise the ball. When the umpire makes a really good decision and has been vindicated, there should be something where he, does his own private out to the crowd and they cheer him just to accept that he's made a great decision. I'd like to see that happen.
Oh, I would love that. And I don't believe in this whole thing that the umpires had a great day if he or she doesn't get noticed. Because you're also spending 7 hours there on your feet, so you deserve that moment. And I'm all for umpires doing press conferences. Just wait for the day when I become a test umpire. I'm doing press conferences.
I'd love to see you as a test umpire. Cannot wait for that. Now, moving to Justin Langer again, as we always seem to do, but he's put a few quotes up on LinkedIn, quoting a famous thought person. And I'll just read a couple of them. The wise man says, "Be yourself. You are unique and you are special. Be happy, be healthy, be calm, be strong, and be yourself." And the Andrew Wu in the Channel 9 press has made the point that the post on LinkedIn has left players and sources close to the team perplexed, with some construing it as a jab at players who have grown weary of his abrasive and intense management style. Is there anything to this story, Bharat?
Personally, no. I mean, I love Andrew Wu. He's a wonderful, colleague to have in the press box. And, he and whichever journalist is entitled to their opinion. And they, of course, listen to their sources, which is how it should be. But having seen Justin Langer with the Aussie team, just for those 3 days here at the Adelaide or next to the Adelaide Oval, when they were quarantining after the West Indies and Bangladesh tour, and after everything had just come blown through the roof, this big news about Justin Langer and what the players thought of him, I thought he seemed that I didn't see any edge between him and the players in that group anyway. And there's only been support. Ashton Agar has come out and said that, he helped him through his mental health issues. But it just tells you again, Paul, that when things aren't going well for you, or, when the team's not doing too well, anything you do will be perceived as in a negative light. It's just a fact of life. It doesn't matter whether you're Justin Langer or you have anything to do with cricket. And one thing we do know about Justin Langer is, yes, he does have this tendency of using probes and quotes. Even in press conferences, he talks about how he reads a lot. And I know that one quote he loves to talk about, he says he has it in his office, is, "If you haven't gone to Harvard, find someone who's gone to Harvard," or something along those lines. So he is known to do that. Why did he pick LinkedIn of all platforms? We will never know. That for me is the most peculiar of the whole, of every facet to this story. But I'm sure he has a good reason for that. But I mean, we haven't heard from Justin Langer in a while, though. After all that has happened. So till that happens, I think there will be speculation, and that's just the way of the world.
Anyone who is watching on YouTube will probably see that I've got to get my ability to look at notes a bit better. Every time I look at the notes, it looks like I'm about to commit a bank robbery. My eyes are sort of darting to the corner. I am actually listening to Bharat. Something I'll try and do better next time, but apologies for the moment. Hey, Bharat, is there any chance whatsoever of Stokes coming for the Ashes, do you think?
I don't think so, Paul. I think they've made it very clear in many ways that they're going to stick to their squad, and he's just coming off surgery, and yeah, he's just held his bat. I think there's so much more recovery that needs to be done for him to come over. If you think about it, the first Ashes test is less than 2 months away. So then you talk about, and we still don't know what the reasons were for him taking that break. And whether he's he's feeling better with that as well. We know that physically, yes, he seems to have overcome the fact that he can finally hold a bat, but we don't know where he is mentally, and we will maybe over time. But for now, I'd be very, very surprised if he does make it. But hey, it's good news though. There's been so much negativity around this Ashes in many ways, not just in terms of whether it'll happen or not, but also now with this whole and I know you're dying to talk about it, with certain former English cricketers saying stuff about the Australian crowds and all that. So at least in all that, just one Instagram post I think has lit up the Ashes, even if it doesn't mean that Ben Stokes is coming.
Yeah. Oh, look, maybe I'm naive, but that post has made me think that there's a realistic chance that he's going to come. I'm not saying he will, but I think it's more than trivial. Yeah, to your point, I'm really interested in your take on this. So Jeffrey Boycott, who never short of an opinion, has written a piece warning England how difficult it's going to be in Australia, and he talked about how what's the quote here, that the crowds in Australia are more vocal and partisan than in the UK. Now, when Boycott was playing here in the 70s, that may well have been the case. But I'm interested in you, Bharat. From what I've seen of Australian crowds, especially when you remove the Barmy Army presence versus England crowds, I think that England crowds, with the exception of Lords, are 20 times more raucous than Australian crowds. What do you reckon?
I was there at Edgbaston in 2019, Paul, and that was pretty nasty. I mean, it went from just them being excited to outright abuse against Smith and Warner. And
we saw you crying on the telly. We saw you crying on the telly. That was the bad bit. Yeah.
Oh, that was the bad bit. And I think David Warner made a great point to then take after Australia won that test. He was right there in front of that stand. I forget the name.
Holly stand.
Was that
the Holly stand?
The Holly stand, exactly. And and he was just playing around with his kids and all that. I think it was a strong statement. And trust me, I'm not the only journalist who covered that series who still at night suddenly wakes up to same old Aussies, always cheating. Oh God, it was like, yeah, it's still, I still get nightmares of that. No, I think the crowds during that Ashes were pretty nasty, even in Manchester and everywhere else. So I don't see, now having lived here and seen the crowds here as well, I don't think, I'm with you. I don't agree with Jeffrey Boycott. The English crowds can really, really turn it up a notch when it comes to really going after the opposition.
And look, aside from the crying on the telly bit, I think that the crowds there are fantastic, and we've got a lot to learn from them. I think we've gone too far the other way, whereas it was once a bit raucous, and they've toned it down so much that it's sometimes like being in a bit of a library. And yeah, that same old Aussie's always cheating. That, I'll tell you, one of the saddest moments of my life was when I was first watching a Premier League game years ago, and I heard same old Arsenal, always cheating, and I suddenly realised, it wasn't something they specially constructed for the Australians. It's actually just a football chant to the tune of Big Ben that has been co-opted into cricket, which is so often the case. Now, the WBBL, just wanted to quickly mention, first game live 7:40 p.m. tomorrow night. And I just thought, would they have it on Channel 7 or on 7 Mate? So 7's the main channel in Australia. 7 Mate's their secondary channel. They've got it on 7 Mate. And I just thought, what are they up against? Well, at the time that it begins, they've got on Channel 9 paramedics, and on Channel 7 they've got Channel 10 paramedics and Channel 9 ambulance. So there's two paramedic shows that it could have been up against. I really wish they'd put it on Channel 7. They've got Love Island Australia, which is on Channel 9 later on, which is Channel 9's big show, and they've been advertising it ad nauseum. I reckon that the WBBL could actually outrate them, and I think it'll do really well on 7 Mate. But it would have been great to kick it off on the main channel to begin with. But I digress to what I really wanted to say. That I just wanted a quick thought on what you think of. Do you think that the latest Australia-India series will be that light bulb moment for the BCCI, and they'll now pour funds into women's cricket, or are we still yet to get to that point, do you think?
Honestly speaking, I think we're still to get to that point, Paul. Just being there for those 6 days on the Gold Coast and covering that test was a great experience, but it also told me about how women's cricket is still being perceived back in India. I mean, we can speak about it in detail some other day, but it did tell me that it's still a way to go. I mean, they just announced payment structures for all teams across all levels in India, and there were people who weren't happy with what the women are being paid in this current cycle. But I think the India-Australia tour will have some impact on it come next year. But for them to come anywhere close to parity, or even be up there where they should be when it comes to what they get paid, it'll take a few more years. But it's coming. The signs are positive.
All right, cool. And finally, as I again negotiate my way through this far too small laptop to look at my notes, David Warner has had a quote about his situation at SRH, and he's written, he said, I had 4 bad games, 2 run-outs in that, on slow and low wickets in Chennai. It's difficult, a bitter pill to swallow, but I don't think I will ever get answers and must move on. It's time to look forward. There's another auction coming up. I'd love nothing more than to represent Sunrisers still, but the decision remains with the owners and what direction the franchise wants to go in. It does occur to me that in ultimately removing him once they kind of thought we can no longer make the semi-finals, I think that was a fairly... I don't mind them dropping him early on in the tournament, but once they realized that he could no longer make the semi-finals, rather than saying, well, we want blood for the future and bring in youngsters, wouldn't it have been better to say, he's been our best player ever. If he regains form, he's still got a couple of really good years ahead. Let's let him every chance to play in these last few games so that we can keep him with the franchise. Does the fact that they didn't do that indicate there's been a breakdown somewhere?
I would go the other way, Paul, and say the fact that they were so vocal about why they dropped him on both occasions. Right, they sent a press release during the India leg saying he's going to be dropped, and not just as captain, but he won't play that last game of that leg, and Williamson will take over. And again, to come out with a statement like that about categorically saying that he won't be playing again, tells you that there's a lot more to it than just cricketing reasons. It's just very obvious. Even if I might be speculating a little here. And I think the time has come for him to move on. The signs weren't good even during that first leg. And just speaking to a couple of players within that team as well, not during the UAE leg, but during the India leg, they also felt that something was not right. Just the way he was with the team, or more so with how they were with him, the powers that be. So I think, I guess it's, I do feel for David Warner. He's given so much to Sunrisers and to Hyderabad, not just on the field, but off the field as well. The support he's given them. Like, I always joke about how every Instagram post in the last 3 years has been about Hyderabad and Telugu music and his kids wearing Sunrisers jerseys.
It's amazing.
So I just feel bad that it's come to an end, like a tragic end, where he doesn't even get a farewell. But hey, 2 new franchises coming up, and David Warner's stocks in the IPL will not dip just because Sunrisers have left him off.
And it could be a few Sunrisers Hyderabad fans find themselves cheering on a new franchise come next season. Well, Bharat, as always, it's been great to have you on the show. I hope everyone has enjoyed the show. If you've been listening on podcast apps, please continue to do so. If you have been watching on YouTube, please send us a comment, give us a like, all those usual things that you're supposed to say at the end of these videos. Hope you've enjoyed the show, and we're back with another Cricket Daily tomorrow.